Welcome to the Bristol Business Connection. The Bristol Business Connection is a co-production of the Bristol County Chamber of Commerce, Fall River Community Media, and of course, Bristol Community College. Every month, the Chamber of Commerce does interview guests about the issues impacting businesses right here in Bristol County. Of course, my name is Jennifer Lourenco. I'm the Communications Manager for the Bristol County Chamber of Commerce. And we have a very special guest today, the CEO and President of the Bristol County Chamber of Commerce, kind of switching roles today, Rob Million.
How are you doing, Jen?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I like being the guest.
Well, we have a lot to discuss about the business climate right now. And how are things going for the Chamber when it comes to member businesses within the Chamber?
So, the Chamber of Commerce is an organization that represents the interests of its member businesses. We're created by businesses to represent their interests. And what we have observed is in this climate of recovery, in this climate of growth, businesses are striving to stay whole and stay solid. It's not easy for them. You would think, okay, we're outside of the recession, all is good, they can relax, maybe get that membership to the golf course. Not the case. Businesses are working harder probably than they have worked any time in their existence previously, and they're fighting for those margins. That's what we're observing. That's the feedback that we're getting from a lot of our members, is that they are working very hard, they are working with less to make more, and they're fighting for those margins.
What do you see as being some of the big challenges that are facing businesses right now?
I think the big challenges for them is to find a way to be viable, to increase or maintain existing revenues as consumers are finding new ways to purchase, particularly the retail sector. Businesses in the retail sector are trying to deal with that. For businesses in general, they're dealing with higher costs of doing business, but they're not necessarily able to raise the cost of their products. So higher energy costs, higher employment costs, higher taxes. Those are challenges that they're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis, because the bills keep coming in. They've got to write out the checks, but they need to have the revenues coming in that help pay for those bills that they're paying out.
And why does the business climate matter to the people watching this program right now?
Because if the business climate isn't good and revenues decline from businesses, then tax dollars decline to the communities where these businesses reside. So two levels to this. One, at the state level, if revenues are not coming in, if businesses are not making net profits that are being taxed on for income tax, then the state doesn't meet its revenue projections. And you get budget gaps. And that's exactly what we're seeing here in Massachusetts as we speak. We're seeing a sizable revenue gap going on between projections where the state had projected 3.9% gains for revenues from its business taxes, but are actually only receiving in the 1.2% range. So a huge gap, and there you do this month after month after month, and you're seeing this revenue gap that could exceed $1 billion as a result. So that's at the state level. At the local level, when businesses are not succeeding, or when the business environment or the climate is not conducive to businesses, businesses leave. And when businesses leave, you lose jobs. And when you lose jobs, you lose the ability for a community to sustain itself. And we witnessed that here in the greater Fall River area back in 2009, 2010, 2011.
Right. What are some of the factors that do come into play that affect the business climate?
The cost of doing business, all factors that impact the cost of doing business, they impact the climate. In addition to the education of the workforce, that impacts the business climate too. Particularly as here in Massachusetts, we're in the innovative technology sector, or where technology is leveraged so heavily. If you're in a community where only 82% or less than 80, let me rephrase that. When you're in a community where only 18%, where 82% of your community has less than a college education, That's a problem. That impacts the business climate. But more importantly, when you're in a state where you've got the highest energy costs or where you have the highest health insurance costs, that impacts the cost of doing business. And that ultimately impacts the business climate. Infrastructure impacts the business climate too, the availability of infrastructure.
We've talked a lot recently about unemployment right here in Massachusetts, but wages apparently not going up as fast as many people might want that to occur. What is your analysis to the disparity between wages and the low unemployment that we've seen lately?
This is an interesting question, and I recall recently reading an article in Mass Live, and I recall reading a study that was put out by the University of Massachusetts on this very issue, that there's a concern in the state of Massachusetts of this disparity between wages and the cost of living here in Massachusetts. And the question is, why hasn't wages gone up when you have virtually everybody employed who wants to be employed in the state of Massachusetts? What's going on here? And what we at the Chamber of Commerce are recognizing through reviewing statistics from the Department of Labor and also at the Massachusetts level, and in talking with and communicating with Mass Taxpayers Foundation here in Massachusetts, and also a Retailers Association and National Federation of Independent Businesses and Association of Industries in Massachusetts, what we are observing is that the cost of doing business in Massachusetts, state mandated increases to the cost of doing business, are having an impact on wages in Massachusetts. So as we are artificially increasing the cost of doing business here as compared with other states, businesses are absorbing these impacts, and instead of raising wages, they're providing the benefits that they're mandated to provide by the state. And it is, you look at the data and it's right there in front of you. It's interesting, particularly when it's not necessarily interesting because it impacts lives, but you can see a direct correlation for the last 20 years between wages and the cost of doing business when you compare the two.
Now, how do those mandates that we're seeing in our state compare to other states?
Massachusetts is, I would say, when you compare and contrast with the other 50, I'm including 50 when I say the District of Columbia, the other 50 states, or the other 49 states plus District of Columbia, and you can say Puerto Rico too, and Guam and some other territories. We are one of the highest, if not one of the top 4 highest cost of doing business states in the United States. And there are many things that we are number 1. And it's the thing that you don't want to be number 1 with. And that is having a major impact on business growth and on revenue growth here in Massachusetts.
Now, how then, or what evidence, I guess you could say, is there that this high cost of doing business in the state is actually having an impact on the state's economy?
So the evidence that displays this is your lack of growth in wages, but more importantly, it is when you take the totality of the circumstances, when you look to the behaviors of businesses after they have absorbed a $11 minimum wage, highest in the country right now, although some others are about to go up, after they have absorbed sick pay leave, which only a handful of other states have as well, after they have absorbed the highest unemployment insurance rates in the country, the highest energy costs in the country, after they have absorbed the highest cost of healthcare insurance in the country, you can see the impact clear, particularly when you start seeing empty storefronts. And there's an initiative that is being produced by the Retailers Association of Massachusetts called the Empty Storefronts Campaign. It's not a good campaign. It's a campaign displaying on a website storefronts across Massachusetts that are now empty as a result of the business going out of business or closing. And it's deeply concerning. It's a very quiet thing that is happening, and what's pushing these businesses to close is that they can't compete. They can't compete against South Carolina. They can't compete against New Hampshire. And some people just throw in the towel, or others move. And actually, one of the things that we're really concerned about at the Chamber of Commerce, and we've witnessed this here in the greater Fall River area, Jen, is many of our once Fall River companies are now subsidiaries of foreign entities. And when I say foreign entities, I'm not necessarily talking about some entity that's in Malaysia. I'm talking about an entity outside of Massachusetts, a foreign corporation, so their headquarters could be in Texas, or their headquarters could be in Chicago. Or in Canada, we have a number of companies where their headquarters are now in Canada. And the problem that we have is that the boardroom decisions are not being made in Fall River, they're being made in Ontario. So those boardrooms are looking at the cost of doing business in Massachusetts, not in Fall River, and they're saying, it's time to close that plant down because we could be doing it a lot cheaper without them. That's what concerns us.
So healthcare, we can talk about this for a whole half hour.
Yeah, we could just be done with dealing with the healthcare issue.
But how is healthcare affecting the state and business in the state, the business climate?
Massachusetts and Massachusetts businesses pay the highest cost in the country for healthcare insurance. We didn't used to, but we do now. And what we've observed at the Chamber of Commerce is for 4 years in a row, we've been hit with double-digit percentage increases to the cost of health insurance, employer-paid health insurance.
Double-digit.
Double-digit. Seen it at the Chamber of Commerce. You know, we have a healthcare policy that we provide to our employees, and trying to shop out and get the best healthcare that we can provide for our employees, we've had to absorb 14, 22% increases each year. It's crazy. Well, it's not in a vacuum. Everybody else is having to deal with this too. And the cost of healthcare is a deep concern. It is out of control in the state of Massachusetts. It doesn't rise up 3% every year. The cost of healthcare insurance is rising up double digits year after year after year. And the cost of healthcare in Massachusetts, as I said, is the highest in the country, and it's having an impact. The Massachusetts budget, we're now in the process, we're dealing with a $40.7 billion budget. 42% of that $40.7 billion budget funds mass health. We have a saying in law, res ipsa loquitur. It speaks for itself. 30% of the Massachusetts population are part of that mass health system. And it keeps growing. And it is having a major impact on us.
And how is the state looking now to the business community to help fill that gap?
Yeah, interesting question. And the way that our year started this year was the announcement that there is a funding gap within the budget for the state of Massachusetts, and it needs to get backfilled immediately. And the way that, one of the ways to backfill is going to be on an assessment to businesses, a healthcare assessment. So to help pay for this growing mass health issue, and to help pay for this growing gap in the budget as the cost is exceeding what had been anticipated, and to help pay for the gap that was once funded by Medicare that keeps declining, Massachusetts intends to turn to businesses to bridge that gap with a healthcare assessment on businesses. Now, we're still working out the details, and the Chamber has been very much part of this, because the initial idea was that businesses would pay a $2,000 per employee assessment for every employee at the business who was not a member of that business's healthcare insurance plan that exceeded 80%. So if less than 80% of that business had its employees and their spouses on their plan, then they would have to pay per employee a $2,000 hit per the original idea of this assessment. Whether the employee had insurance or didn't have insurance. And what we found was that in many cases, the employee, first of all, the business had the insurance. The business was doing its job. It was providing insurance to its employees. But through no fault of the business, the employee might have a spouse who's on somebody else's plan and might jump onto that program. So as a result of that, the business itself would be under that 80% cap. Therefore, have to pay the $2,000 assessment fee. So the chamber, our board of directors, made it very clear, no way are we going to support that, and we're going to advocate against it, and we did. So the Chamber of Commerce has a philosophy. We're not just somebody we're not an entity that just says we're not going to do it. We seek solutions. And we are working with the state right now in trying to seek out a solution, working within the budget structure. Right now we're in the process, as I said, of working with both the House and Legislature on a state budget. And we're working on a compromise with other business associations on something that is more targeted with a smaller hit to businesses, because we know that there's going to be a hit to businesses, Jen. There's either going to be, we know it because the language is in both the House and Senate versions, and now it's in the conference committee. There's going to be a hit to businesses. We're trying to minimize that hit. So that's where we're at right now. It's kind of concerning. But our problem is that it isn't just this that businesses are dealing with. They're dealing with a whole bunch of other bills in play that will additionally raise the cost of business.
In totality.
Yes.
All right, well, why don't we go ahead and take a quick break for a public service announcement. You're, of course, watching the Bristol Business Connection, and we'll be right back after these messages.
The emphasis is on the word community.
That prides itself on making things.
It's the culture of Portugal and the culture of Fall River.
History, hard work, manufacturing.
We're making it and we're moving it forward.
It's a great place to live, work, and create.
If you think you know Fall River, think again. Fall River isn't a place you pass through, it's a destination. Fall River isn't on the mend, it's on the rise. Fall River isn't about accepting your fate, it's about creating your destiny. We can revive pride and instill positivity. We can make room for this rise. We can make it here.
And welcome back to the Bristol Business Connection. Of course, the Bristol Business Connection is co-produced by the Bristol County Chamber of Commerce, Fall River Community Media, and our workforce education partners right here at Bristol Community College. And continuing our conversation, we left off with healthcare and where things are at the state level in regards to the assessment. What is the Chamber doing now to address the proposed healthcare assessment on businesses? We did talk a little bit about that before the break.
Yeah, so we're working with NFIB, National Federation of Independent Businesses. We're working with the Retailer Associations of Massachusetts and the Associated Industries of Massachusetts. The Chamber itself is representing the chambers across the state. We have an association of chambers called the Massachusetts Association of Chamber Execs. And it just so happens that our Chamber of Commerce right now is in the position where we're leading that organization with its government affairs wing. And we're representing many of the chambers across the state in those negotiations on a hopeful compromise that reduces what that assessment could be to businesses.
Absolutely.
So it's a work in progress.
And why must an assessment on businesses, I guess, be tied to addressing the cost of health care, or
all
there
right,
is no
so details. So before our members get upset with us over the fact that we're even compromising or working to compromise or talking with the other side, there's a quid pro quo. A long-standing observation and advocacy point for the Chamber is that the state of Massachusetts needs to address the cost of health care. The cost of health care is a major driver in the cost of health insurance for employers. So in order to get us at the table, this is an issue that is being addressed as part of a 2-year compromise, that cost containments will be part of the solution if we are to come to a compromise. In addition, we're calling for a 2-year sunset to any assessment that does get passed if we are able to come to common ground.
Now, jumping kind of off of the healthcare springboard, what are some of the other legislative actions this session have the chamber been discussing with its members? I'm privy. We're,
Yeah, it's
we're privy of what's going on.
this year I've never seen anything like it, with so many elements within the legislature that would raise the cost of doing business all at once. In the past, it was normally you were dealing with 1 or 2 bills that could potentially raise the cost of doing business, and then you put your efforts into it. Here we're dealing with probably about 5 all at once. I mean, there's thousands of bills in play, but there's 5 big ones that have a real chance.
Have you ever seen that many before?
Not like this. And they're big ticket items. Each one's a big ticket item, and that's the problem. Any one of these will raise the cost of doing business materially, substantially. So a $15 minimum wage, the Millionaires Tax, which I've said a number of times is not a Millionaires Tax, it's a tax on businesses, and I can explain that later. Employer paid, very important, employer paid family and medical leave. In addition, strict scheduling, I love that one. Strict scheduling where, and I'll talk about that too if you want, where an employer would have to upfront provide 3 weeks notice of what the schedule would be for the employee, or pay time and a half. Crazy. I mean, who can do that?
Okay, so let's talk about the employer
Having nothing to do
paid
with energy
family
costs. And
and
there's bills
medical.
also in play to raise the cost of energy in the state that has the highest cost of energy in the continental United States.
Right. Well, let's kick back and talk about the employer paid. This is not employee, this is employer, and that's
important.
very-
That's a key sticking point, Jen, because first off, one thing that we have also recognized and observed is that when these bills are in play at the legislature or when they're discussed in the media, they are taken as if they exist in a vacuum. But in life, nothing exists in a vacuum. Everything is impacted by other things. That's why I always use this totality of the circumstances argument when I discuss impacts to businesses, because it isn't just paid family leave that's impacting a business. It's the fact that they're already paying sick pay leave right now, employer paid sick pay leave, which, by the way, only a handful of states in the country allow, and ours is actually a far greater benefit than any other state in the country. But on top of that, we want to add to the cost by having employer paid family and medical leave, which doesn't exist in any other state in the country. There are a couple of states that have paid family and medical that are employee paid funded programs, not employer paid. The one before the legislature right now would be employer paid, on top of the fact that employers are already paying sick pay leave. That concerns us greatly. That's going to have a tremendous impact to the cost of doing business in
And no other
Massachusetts.
state.
No other state's doing this. No other state even has it on the table to do. That's deeply concerning to us.
Going back to the minimum wage situation right now, and we all know that this $15 minimum wage is a possibility. How is that going to affect, again, the cost of doing business in Massachusetts, in Bristol County?
The minimum wage is a very interesting question, and I remember back when the $11 minimum wage was introduced, I remember the attacks on the Chamber of Commerce over the issue of the $11 minimum wage. The problem that we have in Massachusetts, again, is that we do minimum wage like nobody else does minimum wage. And what I mean by that, Jen, is, so we have an $11 minimum wage right now. Massachusetts is the only state that I know of that has the Sunday law where retailers pay time and a half on Sunday. I don't think any other state in the country has that on the books. So it isn't $11 an hour on Sunday, it's $16.50 on Sunday. Massachusetts is one of the few states in the United States that doesn't have a teen wage as well. And I think we're the only state in New England that doesn't have a teen wage.
Now clarify that for people that are watching and might not know what that is.
So many states have a minimum wage, but then below the minimum wage, they also have a lower teen wage, a wage for 16-year-olds or 19-year-olds to introduce them into the workforce. For internships, for example, so that they can get internships. Massachusetts, the teen wage is the minimum wage. So the minimum wage is $11 an hour right now. And on Sundays, you know, if it's retail sector, it's $16.50, and that's your teen wage. You know, that's it. You get one wage. The problem that we have in Massachusetts is that we compete. Our two borders, Rhode Island and New Hampshire, have teen wages. In addition to that, Rhode Island has a minimum wage of $9.60 right now. Ours is $11. There's a push to make it $15. The Rhode Island minimum wage is, as I said, $9.60, and they've got a teen wage of, I believe, $7.20. So substantially less than the $11 that we have here. New Hampshire has a minimum wage of $7.25 and a teen wage of $5.46. Our businesses here are competing against that. It's not in a vacuum. That's who they compete against. And when companies are looking to have 100 employees, that becomes a factor for them. That concerns us. We're making ourselves non-competitive.
Right. And jumping then to the Millionaires Tax. Not
Millionaires
necessarily a millionaire. Can you talk a little bit about that and what this exactly is?
Yeah, I'll try to condense this down. So the Millionaires Tax that is going to be on ballot in 2018 is cutely called a Millionaires Tax, but it is really a business tax. It's a hidden business tax because it is a tax on any income over $1 million. Any income over $1 million. It's specific. That's the specific language. So how many millionaires or how many people who net $1 million reside in Massachusetts? There aren't many. How many companies that are registered as limited liability companies, which is a pass-through entity, or S-corps, which is a pass-through entity, reside in Massachusetts that make $1 million? Many.
Right.
So in order for you to collect $2 billion in revenues, it has to come from businesses. It has to be a tax on businesses in order to come up with that revenue stream. Now, what's also concerning to us is that the advertisement of the Millionaires Tax is that it's going to be a tax that the revenues are going to be used for education and for infrastructure. That's the advertising. The problem is, constitutionally, you can't do that. It doesn't work that way. Constitutionally, that money has to go into the general coffers of the state. Now, whether it gets allocated to that in the end is a different story, but the legislature can use it for anything it wants.
Okay. The high cost of energy, we touched on that a little bit at the very beginning of the show. What is being done to help curb this for businesses?
Nothing. I'm sorry. This has been a top issue for the Chamber of Commerce for years, and it's because we have the highest costs for energy in the continental United States here in Massachusetts, and it keeps going up. This year, the capacity tax, so your energy bill is divided into two elements. There's what you use, and there's the delivery of the energy itself, or the electricity itself. So your usage is multiplied times a capacity tag. The capacity tag this year just went up 33%. Next year, what went up 33% is going to go up another 57%. Wow. Now, we already have the highest energy costs in the continental United States, and it's going to go up more. I'm just telling you, and there's nothing. If anything, what we're doing is we're setting ourselves up to raise it even more because we've got 10,000 megawatts of electricity going offline. Brayton Point just went offline. Montauk already went offline, and an additional 8,000 megawatts is going offline in the next couple of years with nothing to replace it immediately. Well, that raises the cost of energy. And now we have legislation that's in play right now stating that any future allocation is going to come from just green sources, so we can't use anything that is non-green. That's going to raise the cost of energy.
And all of this, of course, the Bristol County Chamber of Commerce, of which you're the president and CEO, we continue to advocate for every day for our member businesses.
Yes.
So it's important. Yes. Chamber membership does matter.
It does. It does.
All right, and don't forget to remember to shop locally whenever you get the opportunity. And thanks for watching today, the Bristol County Business Connection.
Very good.